Iris Bennett had never felt silence quite like this, heavy, suffocating, thick enough to drown in. At 22, with warm brown skin that glowed even under the dull dorm lights and curls that framed her face like a halo, she'd always believed she was resilient. She'd survived childhood storms, academic pressure, and a world that demanded she fight twice as hard to prove she belonged. But nothing prepared her for this. Nothing prepared her for walking into her boyfriend's apartment and finding him with her best friend, limbs tangled, lips pressed, moans echoing in the air like ugly confessions. She didn't scream. She didn't throw anything. She didn't beg for an explanation she already knew would be a lie. She simply stood there, frozen at the doorway, watching two people she loved betray her without shame. They'd seen her. They'd tried to speak, but Iris had already turned away, numbness swallowing her whole. Now, hours later, she no longer felt numb. She felt nothing, which somehow hurt more. The world outside buzzed with Friday night energy, but inside her chest there was a dead quiet. Her heart wasn't just cracked. It felt hollowed out, like something essential had been scooped away. That was how she found herself wandering toward the faint neon glow of the Solstice Bar, the closest place still open after midnight. She didn't plan to drink. She didn't plan to stay. She only needed something, anything, to cut into the suffocating emptiness. The bar welcomed her with warm amber lights and a low hum of jazz that seeped from the speakers like honey. But Iris didn't notice anything except the quietest seat she could find at the counter. She slid onto a stool, exhaled shakily, and stared at her trembling hands. It was then she sensed a presence to her right. Not someone looking at her, but someone also trying not to fall apart. She turned her head slightly. A man sat 2 seats away, slouched against the bar, with an unfinished glass of something amber. He wasn't drunk, just lost. There was something haunting about the way he held himself, like he was trying to keep the world from collapsing on top of him. He was older, early 30s maybe, sharp jawline dusted with stubble, white shirt open at the collar, elegant watch glinting under the dim light, and eyes icy blue piercing exhausted. He looked like wealth, success, and control wrapped into a single, polished figure. But she could see it instantly. The man was hurting. He wasn't sipping his drink. He was holding it like a lifeline. She looked away quickly, not wanting to intrude. But the bartender approached, and she ordered the strongest drink she could name. The man's gaze flickered toward her. "Rough night," he murmured, voice low, smoky. Iris inhaled sharply. She hadn't planned to talk to anyone, but something in his tone, a steady softness, not pity, untied her defenses. You could say that she whispered, "You look like you're trying to outrun something." She let out a hollow laugh. Maybe, or maybe something caught up to me. He studied her quietly, like her words were pieces of a puzzle he recognized. For a moment, they didn't speak. They didn't need to. Two broken hearts could sense each other without effort. After a beat, he said, "I'm Blake." His name struck a faint chord, familiar in a distant, impossible way, but her brain was too muddled to connect the dots. She didn't introduce herself. Not yet. He didn't push. Instead, he offered a truth of his own voice, barely above a murmur. "My girlfriend ended things tonight." A small, bitter smile. 3 years. Gone in 3 sentences. Iris's breath hitched. He wasn't fishing for sympathy. He was confessing, because he needed to say it out loud to someone who wouldn't use it against him. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "Don't be. I deserved it." He looked down at his hands. "I cared. I just never showed up." She said I was married to my work. He was rich, successful, a man with everything, yet somehow losing what mattered most. Iris swallowed. "My ex cheated on me tonight." She let the words fall raw and trembling. "With my best friend." His head snapped toward her eyes, burning with a protective anger she didn't expect. "You didn't deserve that." "Neither did you," she said softly. And just like that, a fragile thread connected them. Two strangers sitting side by side, held together by pain neither asked for. No flirting, no pretense, just honesty. They talked, slowly, then freely. She told him things she hadn't told anyone. How betrayal wasn't a sharp cut, it was a slow poison. How trust shattered quietly like glass behind closed doors. He told her the story of a man who tried so hard to become successful he'd forgotten how to be present. How he thought providing was enough. How he learned too late that love required attention. They shared their failures, their regrets, their fears. And for a strange, fleeting moment, the bar around them blurred into nothing, leaving only two souls recognizing each other's wounds. One drink became two. Two became three. Time melted. By the fourth drink, Iris felt warmth seep into her bones, a warmth that wasn't alcohol, but the comfort of finally being understood. Blake wasn't trying to impress her. She wasn't trying to protect her pride. They simply were two honest, hurting people in the truest version of themselves. Hours later, when Iris slid off the stool, the world tilted. She stumbled. Blake reached out instantly, catching her wrist. Their eyes collided. Her breath hitched. His jaw clenched. There was no hunger in his gaze, just aching exhaustion, and a plea for something human to hold on to. "I should go," she whispered. He nodded slowly, but his fingers didn't let go. "Are you okay to walk?" he asked. "No," she admitted, voice cracking. "But I can't stay here." Something softened in his expression, something vulnerable and painfully familiar. "Then let me at least make sure you don't fall." He didn't offer to take her home, didn't suggest anything inappropriate. He simply steadied her with quiet respect, guiding her out the door as if she were made of something delicate. Outside, the night air was cold. Fog clung to the streetlights. Everything looked softer, dreamlike. A taxi rolled to a stop. The driver opened the door, but Iris hesitated on the sidewalk. Blake stood inches from her eyes, full of a loneliness she felt echoing inside her chest. Neither spoke, neither moved away. It was Blake who whispered first. "Tonight's been a lot." "That's one way to put it," she said, a humorless smile tugging at her lips. "I don't know what this is," he murmured, voice trembling at the edges, "or why it feels like you get it in a way no one else ever has." Her throat tightened. "I feel that too." His hand held hesitant, almost frightened, and brushed a curl from her cheek. "I don't want to be alone tonight," he confessed, breath shaky. "But I don't want you to do anything you'll regret." Her pulse fluttered. "It's not about regret," she whispered. "It's just, I'm tired of holding everything together. Just for tonight. I don't want to be strong." The words hung between them like a fragile truth neither knew how to touch. And then, with the kind of quiet desperation only the heartbroken understand, they leaned into each other, not for passion, not for heat, but for comfort. Just two damaged souls collapsing into the closest warmth. They didn't kiss. They didn't promise anything. They simply held on to each other as if drowning. The driver cleared his throat. Hotel neither corrected him. Somewhere between the fog and their grief agreement slipped between them, like instinct. A nod from her, a nod from him. The taxi door shut. When they reached the hotel corridor, Iris giggled, a broken, breathless laugh, and Blake echoed it equally wrecked. Their pain was bleeding into laughter, now thin and unstable. At the door of the room, Iris blinked up at it. "This is crazy." "Yeah," he whispered. "But tonight, crazy feels easier than lonely." The keycard beeped. The door swung open, and the night swallowed them whole. No passion, no flames, just exhaustion, warmth, and two hearts clinging to the closest heartbeat. The door clicked shut behind them. It was either a mistake or the beginning of a story neither of them were ready for. Morning after, they woke to sunlight, to confusion, to clothes half scattered, to memories blurred like watercolor. She gasped. He sat upright. I didn't know it was you," Iris stammered. Blake stared stunned. "The girl at the bar is you." Recognition, shock, something almost like fear. She grabbed her things, heart hammering. "I should go." He didn't stop her. He only watched her leave, eyes wide, chest tight, as if realizing something important, something irreversible. Hook for next part. As the elevator doors closed in front of her, Iris pressed a hand to her chest. Her stomach twisted. Not from last night, not from alcohol, but from a sudden sharp wave of nausea. Something was wrong, or maybe something had already begun. And the real story, their story, was just beginning. The first thing Iris felt was warmth. Not the comforting kind. This warmth was foreign expensive wrong. Her eyelids flickered open to sunlight spilling across a bed far too soft to belong to her dorm room. For a moment, her mind was blank. Then she saw the high ceiling, the velvet gray curtains, the marble bathroom where a towel still dripped faintly onto the tiles. A white shirt, large, crisp, undeniably masculine, hung over the back of a chair. Her breath snagged. She sat up so fast her head spun. Her curls tumbled around her face as she stared at the unfamiliar sheets wrapped around her body. This isn't happening. She pressed both hands to her temples, trying to gather the scattered fragments of last night. But all she found were blurred impressions. Soft laughter, the slow way he had walked beside her, the unspoken heaviness between them. A stranger's heat beside her, a stranger's pain mirroring hers. Her heart lurched. She shoved aside the blanket and swung her legs off the bed, moving on impulse. She scanned the floor, no clothes. They had ended up on the other side of the room, a forgotten trail near the minibar. Her stomach tightened. The air felt too quiet, too intimate. She grabbed her dress, slipped it on with shaking hands, barely managing to zip it. Her purse was near the nightstand, her shoes kicked under the chair where his shirt hung. That shirt, that single, careless piece of fabric, made the whole room feel smaller, made last night feel painfully real. Iris swallowed, throat dry, eyes stinging. Shame pressed against her ribs, not because of what happened, but because she hadn't meant for any of it. She didn't do things like this. She didn't unravel in front of strangers. She didn't bare her wounds to men she didn't know. And I don't wake up in their beds. Her pulse quickened as she caught her reflection in the mirror, smudged mascara, swollen eyes, vulnerability written across her skin. She looked like a girl who had come undone, and she hated it. On the desk by the window, she found a pen from the hotel, a small notepad. Her hand hovered trembling. What could she even say? Her teeth pressed into her bottom lip before she forced herself to write something, anything that would create distance between last night and the rest of her life. Just one line. Her handwriting wavered, but she didn't stop. She folded the note, placed it neatly where he couldn't miss it. Her chest tightened painfully. Then Iris gathered her things, took one last look at the quiet room. The evidence of two broken hearts seeking shelter in each other, and slipped out. She didn't look back. Blake woke to silence. He blinked slowly, disoriented by the unfamiliar softness beneath him. It was rare for him to wake after sunrise, rarer still to find himself sleeping so deeply he hadn't heard anyone leave. He pushed himself up the sheet, falling from his torso, and his eyes moved instinctively to the left side of the bed. Empty. The mattress still held the faint shape of her body, as though she'd only just risen. Her warmth lingered in the fabric. Her scent, soft, subtle, still clung to the pillow. He exhaled, a muscle ticking in his jaw. It shouldn't matter. She was a stranger. A fleeting moment. Nothing more. But something inside him bristled. He stood scanning the room for any sign she might simply be in the bathroom, but the towel on the hook was damp, the toiletries untouched, and the air held the stillness of a place abandoned. His gaze landed on the small folded paper on the table near the window. He approached slowly, unfolded it, read. Once, twice, a muscle in his throat tightened. Thank you for listening. Last night, let's pretend it never happened. The words were simple, polite, and they cut through him with humiliating precision. Blake Harrington, CEO, billionaire, a man who had never been left behind in his life, felt something sharp twist beneath his ribs, so she had run, and he had barely woken in time to notice. He let out a humorless breath, fingers curling around the note. What did he expect? A stranger meets him in a bar, shares a few hours of honesty, and then, what? She would want more ridiculous. But the quiet ache blooming in his chest wasn't something he could dismiss. He glanced at the bed again, at the faint indent left by her body. Her hair had brushed his shoulder at some point. Her voice, soft, tired, honest, still echoed in his mind. She wasn't like the women who chased him for his name or his wealth. She wasn't polished or rehearsed. She had looked at him, not at Blake Harrington the billionaire, but at the man underneath, the one he rarely let anyone see. She had seen his loneliness before he even opened his mouth, and he had seen hers. That recognition had been terrifying and strangely comforting. Now it only left a hollow space. He picked up his shirt from the chair, slipping it on with mechanical motions. His movements were always precise, controlled, but today his fingers hesitated, clumsy in ways he didn't understand. He looked at the note one more time. Let's pretend it never happened. He folded it carefully, almost methodically, and slid it into the inside pocket of his jacket, the place he kept things he didn't want anyone to ask about. Then he ran a hand through his hair, letting out a breath he didn't want to call disappointment. She was gone, and she had chosen to stay gone. Good. He didn't have time for complications. He had meetings, schedules a world, to run one that didn't allow room for uncertainty or longing. Still, as he stepped into the elevator, his reflection in the polished metal caught his eye. His jaw was tight, his gaze distant, his chest oddly heavy. He looked like a man missing something he never meant to reach for. Blake closed his eyes briefly. Maybe she was right. Maybe the night was nothing. Maybe it was just two wounded strangers crossing paths. But deep in his gut, something tugged. Something quiet, unwelcome, persistent. As if last night hadn't ended. As if a door had opened instead of closing. He knew one thing for certain. As the elevator doors slid shut, this wasn't over. Not for him. And he had a feeling, not for her either. Blake had never been a man who lingered on anything, certainly not on a stranger who slipped out of his hotel room before sunrise. His life moved fast, structured by schedules that tolerated no deviation. Yet for days after Iris vanished, he found himself pausing at odd moments, thinking of a woman whose name he didn't even know. He told himself it was nothing more than curiosity, an unfinished sentence, a story cut short. He told himself he wasn't searching, which was true enough. He wasn't calling in favors or tapping into databases. He had the power to do it, to find her with a phone call. But something in her quiet dignity, the way she fled without taking anything from him, demanded restraint. She hadn't used him. She hadn't wanted anything. And so he respected the boundary she drew with that one line on the note. Still, he couldn't stop scanning every crowd he walked through, as if she might materialize in the corner of a busy cafe, or step onto the elevator beside him. She never did. Across the city, Iris tried to force her life back into its routine. Morning classes, afternoon shifts at the student center, late nights reviewing lecture notes that blurred on the page. She didn't speak about the hotel room. She didn't mention the man with the distant blue eyes who had looked at her like someone he recognized from a dream. It wasn't a story she could tell without unraveling. But what she couldn't ignore, what she tried and failed to explain away, were the small, unsettling changes. The sudden waves of morning nausea that struck at inconvenient times. The bone-deep exhaustion that clung to her even after long hours of sleep. Her mind insisted it was stress. Her body whispered something else entirely. She hardened herself against that whisper. Not now. Not until she could breathe without feeling the ground tilt. So she kept moving, pushing through the fog of worry and heartache until the day of the university's annual entrepreneurship summit arrived. She attended only because her professor insisted. Extra credit, he said. Valuable networking, he said. Iris had rolled her eyes, but she showed up anyway, coffee in hand, pulse still unsteady from another dizzy spell earlier that morning. The auditorium buzzed with energy. Tech demos, student innovators presenting ideas that flickered with wild ambition, recruiters scanning badges. It was everything she should find inspiring. She felt disconnected from all of it. She found a seat near the middle, pulled her notebook onto her lap, and reminded herself to act like she belonged here, like her world wasn't quietly shifting under her feet. The lights dimmed, the crowd hushed. A voice echoed through the space. Please welcome our keynote speaker, founder, and CEO of Harrington Labs, Mr. Blake Harrington. Iris's breath vanished. Her heart slammed so hard She heard the pulse in her ears. She told herself it couldn't be him. New York had millions of people. What were the odds? But then he stepped into the spotlight. It was him. It was undeniably him. Tall, self-assured, tailored suit sharp as a blade, expression composed, distant, almost cold, except for the faint tension in his jaw that suggested he was someplace else in his mind. For a second, Iris forgot how to breathe. Blake set his notes on the podium, voice steady as he began to speak about innovation, risk failure, and learning to rebuild. But as he scanned the faces before him, his gaze shifted slow, deliberate, and the moment his eyes found hers, everything inside him stilled. He didn't blink, didn't falter, didn't rearrange his expression into something polite or detached. He just looked at her as if stunned to realize she wasn't a memory after all. Iris felt her stomach drop. Her grip tightened around her pen until her knuckles whitened. She wanted to look away, but couldn't. She saw the recognition in his eyes, yes, but also something like disbelief, gratitude, maybe even relief. She didn't smile. He didn't either. There was too much between them now. Uncertainty, unfinished grief, the strange intimacy of sharing a night without knowing each other's names. Blake swallowed once, subtle but visible. Then he continued his speech. His words were flawless, his delivery smooth. No one else in the auditorium noticed the tiny shift in his breath or the way his eyes kept drifting back to hers like a compass that had rediscovered north. But Iris noticed. She felt those glances like a hand brushing her skin. Her thoughts spun. Why him? Why here? Why now? She had spent days trying to erase him from her mind, trying to convince herself he was just a momentary crossing of paths, trying not to think about the nausea she kept dismissing. And now, fate cruel or kind had dragged him onto a stage in front of her. As the applause filled the room at the end of his talk, Blake stepped aside, but his eyes never left her for long. He shook hands, accepted compliments, listened to introductions, all the expected pleasantries, but Iris could tell his attention was somewhere else entirely. On her. Her heart raced as she considered her options. She could leave now. Slip out through the side exit before he reached her. Pretend she'd never seen him again. Pretend last night had actually been a closed door, not the beginning of something dangerous and unavoidable. Or she could stay. Let whatever this was unfold, terrifying, uncertain, magnetic. Her fingers trembled as she collected her things. She didn't notice the sudden hush ripple across the student rows. She didn't see the heads turn. Not until a shadow fell across the aisle beside her. She looked up. Blake stood there. Not on stage, not surrounded by admirers, but right in front of her. Tall, steady, unmistakably intentional. He didn't touch her, didn't speak, didn't smile. He only said her name softly, like he had always known it, Iris. A single word. And everything she'd tried to avoid shattered. Her breath caught. Her pulse leapt to her throat. Her entire world narrowed to the man who shouldn't have remembered her, but did. At that same moment, another wave of nausea twisted through her stomach so violently she swayed forward. Blake's hand shot out, steadying her by instinct. His touch was warm. Too warm. Her eyes widened. His expression sharpened with worry. There was no pretending anymore. Something was happening, something she could no longer outrun. And Blake had just stepped back into her life at the exact moment she felt her world tilting again, this time toward a truth she wasn't ready to face. Iris's knees nearly buckled, and Blake's hand steadied her before she could protest. His grip wasn't forceful, just firm enough to keep her from collapsing. "You need a moment," he said quietly. It wasn't a question. It wasn't an order. Just concern, unexpected, disarming, and painfully sincere. She nodded, breath shallow. When the dizziness passed, she stepped back, creating a polite distance between them. Blake let her go instantly, but the warmth of his hand lingered on her skin long after. "I'm fine," she murmured. He didn't pretend to believe her, but he didn't push either. "Let me get you something warm," he said. "There's a cafe across the quad." Iris hesitated. Every sensible part of her urged her to decline, walk away before things grew complicated. But her legs felt unsteady, her stomach still roiling, and the weight of his gaze held no expectation, only concern. So she nodded. They walked side by side across campus, the autumn air crisp around them. Students passed them without recognition, unaware a billionaire CEO was strolling beside a tired college senior, like they were simply two people trying to catch their breath. Inside the cafe, Blake ordered her a hot cocoa without asking what she wanted. Somehow, he knew. She took the cup with both hands, letting the steam soften the tension in her chest. For a moment, neither spoke. She was the one who broke the silence. "You didn't have to come down from the stage. I know. Then why did you—" He met her gaze steadily. "Because you looked like you were about to disappear." A pause. "And I didn't want you to vanish again." Heat crept up her neck. She looked away, letting the cup warm her palms. "I wasn't trying to disappear." "No." His voice softened. "Then what were you doing?" "I'm still figuring that out," she said truthfully. Blake nodded, accepting the answer without pressing further. The simplicity of it, the way he allowed her the space to breathe, eased something tight inside her. She took a sip. The cocoa was rich and sweet, grounding her in the present moment. "I've been dealing with things," she admitted. "Your ex," he said gently. She blinked in surprise. "You didn't have to tell me," he continued. "I could see it in your eyes the night we met. You looked like someone who'd been hurt by someone who never deserved you." The words weren't flattering, but they struck deep. She stared into her cup, voice quiet. "He cheated on me. With my best friend." Blake didn't wince, didn't offer meaningless sympathy. He simply nodded as if honoring the truth she'd held alone. "That kind of betrayal doesn't fade overnight," he said. "It leaves echoes." Iris swallowed. "And your girlfriend?" "The one who left?" His jaw tightened, but not with anger. "She wanted a partner, and I kept giving her a provider." He exhaled. "I built everything she wanted, except the part she needed most." It was the first time he'd spoken of it without bitterness. The first time he allowed himself to sound human. And the realization struck her behind the immaculate suits and flawless posture was a man who had never learned how to be seen without performing. A man lonely in ways wealth couldn't cure. They sat in silence, the kind that felt strangely intimate, soft, unforced, stitched together by unspoken understanding. This wasn't flirting, wasn't tension. It was two broken pieces, recognizing the shape of each other's cracks. After a moment, Blake leaned back against the booth. I don't usually talk like this, he admitted. I don't either. Maybe that's why it's easy. Easy wasn't the word she would have chosen. It felt dangerous, effortless, magnetic, in a way she wasn't prepared for. But she didn't deny it. Her fingers tightened around the cup. I keep thinking, if I stay busy enough, keep moving fast enough, I won't have to feel anything. Does it work? He asked softly. Her breath trembled. No. His voice lowered. Running never does. The truth of it settled between them, heavy and warm. She looked up and found him watching her with quiet patience, not desire. She realized then he was giving her space to step away if she wanted, space to end this before it grew into something neither of them was ready for. But Iris didn't move. Instead, she said, I'm still not myself lately. Things have been off. Blake's expression sharpened with concern, but he didn't lean closer or overwhelm her with questions. If you ever need help, he said, or someone to talk to again, you can call me. She let the words settle into her bones. He wasn't claiming her. He wasn't asking for anything. He was simply offering presence, a rare, unexpected gift. Thank you, she whispered. Outside, a gust of wind rattled the windows. Inside, something fragile and warm rooted quietly between them. Not passion, not impulse, not the remnants of a night neither could forget, but connection, slow, careful, tender, the kind that healed rather than burned. When they rose to leave, Blake held the door for her. Their shoulders brushed barely a touch, but it sent a soft ripple beneath her skin. As they stepped outside, he said, Take care of yourself, Iris. Her name on his lips felt like something new, something she would remember. You too, Blake. They parted at the steps of the quad, not with promises, not with expectations, but with a lingering glance that hinted neither of them was done with the other. As Iris walked away, another wave of nausea tightened in her stomach. She steadied herself against a tree, breath shaky. This time, she didn't pretend it was nothing. Something was happening, and Blake stepping back into her life felt less like coincidence and more like the first tremor of a much larger storm. Sabrina Price was beautiful in the way a sharpened knife was beautiful, sleek, polished, dangerous if held too close. She had once been Blake Harrington's partner in public, draped over his arm, at galas smiling flawlessly for cameras. She had never loved him. She had loved the spotlight that followed him. And when Blake ended things for good, Sabrina simply assumed he'd eventually return. People like her didn't get replaced. So she had been watching, quietly, patiently, waiting to see what could possibly pull him away from a woman the world considered perfect for him. She hadn't expected the answer to be a college girl with cocoa brown skin and tired eyes. At first, Sabrina dismissed Iris Bennett as irrelevant. Too young, too soft-spoken, too ordinary, at least from Sabrina's warped perspective. But then photos surfaced. Blake walking across campus. Blake, sitting in a cafe, leaning slightly toward Iris in a way he'd never leaned toward Sabrina. Blake usually ice-cold, watching Iris, with an expression so unguarded it felt like betrayal. And Sabrina, for the first time in years, felt something she hated: fear. If Blake moved on, she lost everything: connections, invitations, brand deals, proximity to power. She refused to fade into the background like discarded jewelry. So she did what she was best at. She schemed. It began quietly. A private investigator, a hotel staff member paid in cash, a name on a reservation record from weeks ago. Iris Bennett, room, date, time. Sabrina didn't need to guess what had happened. She smiled cold and satisfied. Perfect. She collected everything she needed, then went further. She hacked Iris's social media, not herself, of course. She had people for that. Old messages were rearranged screenshots, forged threads, made to look like Iris bragged about landing a billionaire and using heartbreak to her advantage. She even manufactured a few fake texts between Iris and Blake, text messages neither had ever sent hinting that Iris had proof of their night and was willing to leak it if necessary, all fabricated, all damning. And then with one tap on her phone, she unleashed it. Iris's world imploded in a matter of hours. She was leaving her sociology lecture when her phone buzzed nonstop. Text tags mentions exploding into a frenzy. She opened one message, then another, and her breath froze. Gold digger. Using him for money. She trapped him. She slept her way into his life. Her hands trembled violently. The hallway became a blur of hostile whispers, curious stares, strangers snickering as they passed. Someone shoved their phone toward her face. "Is this you? Did you really blackmail Blake Harrington?" I didn't." But her voice barely rose above a whisper. She stumbled outside, heart-pounding pulse roaring in her ears. Panic clawed up her throat. How had they known about the hotel? How did they have messages she'd never written? The ground seemed to tilt. Her phone buzzed again. Another notification. She tapped it. A gossip site headline screamed, "College girl manipulates billionaire inside the night." Iris Bennett spent with Blake Harrington. Her stomach twisted violently. The world spun. And then, Iris Blake's voice cut through the chaos like thunder. He reached her in long strides, grabbing her arms to steady her before she crumpled. His usually controlled face was sharp with worry and fury. "What happened?" he demanded. She shook her head helplessly. "I don't know. I didn't do any of this. Blake, I swear I believe you," he said instantly. But belief didn't stop the cameras already flashing from the sidewalk, drawn like flies to scandal. "Blake, look here. Is she your girlfriend? Did she threaten to expose you?" Security from his team flooded the area, within minutes forming a barrier around them. Blake slipped a protective arm around Iris, shielding her from the growing crowd. "Get back," he snarled at a photographer who stepped too close. "Right now." Iris flinched, not from Blake, but from the world closing in. She felt swallowed by voices, accusations, labels she had fought her whole life to outrun. His driver pulled the SUV to the curb. Blake ushered her inside, shutting the door behind them. The chaos remained outside, muffled but relentless. Inside the car, the silence was louder. Iris stared at her shaking hands. "This is because of me. Because of what happened that night." "No," Blake said sharply. "This is because someone wants to hurt you, or hurt us." "Us," she whispered. Blake didn't back down. "Yes, us." Her chest tightened painfully. She wanted to lean on him. She wanted to cry. She wanted to let herself collapse into the strength he offered. But then the second blow hit the one she kept hidden, trembling inside her for days. Her nausea surged again. She grabbed the door handle, gasping. Blake frowned. "Iris, Are you sick? She shook her head, forcing herself upright. I just need air. But air wasn't the issue. Fear was. Fear of what her body might be trying to tell her. Fear of how Blake would react. Fear of becoming the exact stereotype the world already accused her of being. She wrapped her arms around herself, turning away from him. Blake, I don't want your protection, she whispered. His jaw tightened. You don't have to want it. I'm giving it anyway. That's the problem, she said, voice trembling. I don't want to be the girl you save. I don't want to hide behind your power, your privilege when the whole world is calling me things you'll never be called. Her words struck deeper than any accusation outside. Blake inhaled sharply. I'm trying to help, and I'm trying to survive without being swallowed by you, she whispered. The car fell into a heavy, painful silence. Two people hurting for each other, but in completely different ways. Outside, the news kept spreading. Inside, something between them cracked. Not enough to shatter, but enough to ache. Enough to change everything. The storm didn't pass quickly. It lingered, thick and unforgiving, over Iris's life. Every time she opened her phone, the world seemed louder, crueler. Every glance on campus felt suspicious. Even friends who claimed to believe her still hesitated, as if they were afraid of being pulled into the scandal themselves. And Blake made it worse simply by existing. Not intentionally, not by force, but by the way he tried to shield her, the way his security kept circling, the way his name, white, powerful, untouchable, wrapped around her like a net she hadn't asked for. One evening, after another wave of nausea sent her sitting weakly on a campus bench, she realized something had to break. So she called him. He answered on the first ring, breath catching, as if he'd been waiting. Ease. She closed her eyes. We need to talk. Those 4 words hollowed out his voice. Tell me where you are. I'll know, she said softly. Just listen. Silence stretched sharp, fragile. I can't breathe in your world, she whispered. Not right now. Maybe not ever. Blake didn't interrupt, didn't protest, but she could feel his hurt through the line, quiet but intense. I'm tired of being looked at like I don't belong, she continued. Tired of being judged for things you'll never have to think about. Tired of being a headline. You're not a headline to me, he said, voice low. I know, she whispered, but I am to everyone else. And when I stand next to you, I disappear. I become whatever story people want to tell. She pressed a hand over her stomach, trying to steady the swirl of emotions and the secret she hadn't yet found the courage to face. I need time, Blake, she said. I need to find myself again. Not as someone you protect, not as someone the world attacks, just me. There was a long, aching pause. Then Blake exhaled, slow, controlled, surrendering. Okay, he said. The word landed heavily between them. Permission, acceptance, pain. I won't chase you, he added quietly. But I'm not walking away, Iris. Not truly. I'm not asking you to, she murmured. I just need space. I can do that, he said. A beat. Take care of yourself, he added, voice breaking in a way she'd never heard before. She swallowed. You too. When she hung up, her fingers trembled. Distance wasn't what she wanted. It was what she needed, and it hurt more than she expected. Blake didn't fall apart. After the call, he wasn't built that way. But something in him fractured, subtle and deep, like a crack forming beneath steel. For the first time in his life, Stepping back wasn't a weakness. It was an act of love. But stepping back left him alone with himself, and he didn't know how to face that version of Blake Harrington. The one who had always used work as armor. The one who had never had to understand what Iris faced every day just by existing in a world not shaped for her. So, he did something no one expected. He made an appointment. Therapy, a word he had always brushed off. The sessions were uncomfortable at first, full of long silences he couldn't buy his way out of. The therapist asked questions he hated. Why do you equate protection with control? What are you afraid of losing? What makes Iris different? He didn't have answers. Not then. But he kept showing up. And slowly, things inside him began to shift. He learned how privilege could cast a shadow he never intended. How fear of abandonment had shaped him more than success ever did. How love wasn't fixing, but listening, staying, sharing weight instead of carrying it for someone. He'd never been taught any of that. But Iris had shown him the cracks. Therapy taught him how to fill them. Meanwhile, Iris tried to rebuild the pieces of her life. She avoided headlines. She blocked accounts. She focused on schoolwork breathing. But her body wouldn't let her forget the truth she'd been avoiding. The nausea was worse. Fatigue heavier. Emotions sharper than they should be. One night alone in her small dorm room, she stared at the unopened pregnancy test on her desk. Her hand shook as she picked it up. If it's positive, her voice cracked, it changes everything. Blake's face flickered in her mind. Not the billionaire, not the scandal, but the man who had listened to her pain with quiet reverence. The man who had respected her boundaries even when it cost him. Her heart twisted. She wasn't ready. But life wasn't waiting. She drew a breath, opened the box, and walked toward the bathroom. Her reflection caught her eye, scared, exhausted, but determined. No matter the result, one thing was undeniable. Distance hadn't weakened her feelings for Blake. It had clarified them. And fate, relentless patient, wasn't done with them yet. The morning started like any other gray light leaking through the dorm blinds, the faint hum of students shuffling down the hall. Iris, sitting on the edge of her bed, trying to gather enough strength to exist for another day. But then the nausea hit. A sharp, sudden wave that had her stumbling toward the bathroom. Her knees hit the floor, palms pressed to cold tile stomach, twisting uncontrollably. When it finally passed, she slumped against the tub chest, heaving. She'd brushed it off for weeks. Stress, anxiety, too much coffee, and not enough sleep. But this time felt different. Deeper, heavier. Like her body was trying to deliver a message she no longer had the luxury of ignoring. Her hands trembled as she reached for the pregnancy test on the counter. It felt heavier than its weight, like holding a decision, a truth a fate sealed weeks before she'd even realized there was anything to fear. Her breath trembled, her vision blurred, but she forced herself to open the wrapper. I just need to know. Then I can deal with whatever happens. The test lay on the counter, a tiny white stick, face down like it was ashamed to meet her eyes. She paced. She counted seconds. She tried not to cry. Please be negative. Please let this just be stress. Please. Not this. Not now. But her chest already knew. Her body already knew. Her heart, aching, terrified, already knew. When the timer on her phone vibrated, she froze. She couldn't breathe, couldn't move. couldn't even think. Then, gathering everything inside her, she picked up the test. 2 lines. Clear, bright, absolute. Her mouth fell open. A soft gasp escaped her lungs. Fragile, disbelieving, broken. "No," she whispered. "No, no, no." Her knees buckled and she sank to the floor. Tears finally spilled over, hot and relentless. Her hands shook so violently she nearly dropped the test. It blurred through her tears, 2 simple lines that now divided her life into before and after. A single night. A messy, painful, vulnerable night she'd tried to bury in the dark. Now it was alive, real, irreversible. "I'm pregnant. Oh God, I'm pregnant." Fear tightened around her ribs, squeezing the air from her lungs. She saw everything at once: the scandal still clinging to her name, the whispers on campus, the hateful comments online, the weight of being a black woman scrutinized under a spotlight she never asked for. And now, a baby. Blake's baby. Her pulse raced so hard her fingers tingled. She pressed her palms to her eyes, trying to stop the panic crashing through her body. "This can't be happening," she whispered. "Not now. Not like this." But her body had already made the decision without her. She curled into herself on the bathroom floor, hugging her knees, trembling with the force of her fear. How was she supposed to raise a child when her world was already falling apart? How would Blake react? Her heart squeezed painfully at that thought. He deserved to know, didn't he? But the idea of telling him made her stomach twist again. Blake Harrington, the man trying to rebuild himself, trying to understand how to love without overpowering. He was fragile, in ways the world didn't see. He was healing. He was learning. And she was about to drop a grenade into the middle of his fragile progress. A baby would pull him back in, tie them together in a way she wasn't ready for, in a way that terrified her. "I don't want him to feel trapped. I don't want to become another responsibility he failed. I don't want to be someone he helps out of guilt." Her tears came harder. She pressed her forehead to her knees and sobbed silently, shoulders shaking with the weight of a truth too big for her small bathroom to contain. She didn't know how long she stayed like that. Minutes, hours. Time felt meaningless around the pounding of her heart. But eventually, a sliver of clarity cut through the panic. Whatever happened next, whatever choice she made, it had to come from strength. For her. For the tiny life growing inside her. For the future she hadn't expected but now couldn't ignore. She stood slowly, wiping her face with trembling fingers. She looked at herself in the mirror. Mascara, streaked eyes, swollen, fear etched deep into her expression. But beneath it all, there was something else. Resolve. Faint, fragile, but there. She wasn't ready. But she would have to be. Across the city, Blake sat in his office, tapping his pen against unread documents. Something gnawed at him, a quiet, persistent wrongness in the air. He didn't know why. He couldn't explain it, but he felt it in his chest like a warning. "Iris?" He exhaled sharply, leaning back in his chair. It had been days. He had forced himself to give her space. He had stayed away, kept his distance, respected the boundaries she needed. So, why did it feel like she was slipping further than distance alone could explain? He rubbed his forehead, trying to shake off the feeling. He had no idea that at that very moment Iris was holding the truth that would tie their lives together forever. And fate wasn't going to wait much longer. Sabrina didn't set out looking for the truth, she stumbled into it. A rumor, a receipt, a whisper from a clinic employee who recognized Iris's name from the frenzy Sabrina herself had orchestrated. All it took was one careless comment. She looked frightened, kept asking if the test was accurate, and Sabrina's eyes widened with a satisfaction so sharp it bordered on cruelty. Pregnant. Iris Bennett was pregnant. It wasn't just leverage. It was ammunition. It was the kind of news that could destroy a reputation with one headline. Her fingers flew across her phone. She didn't hesitate, didn't consider consequences, didn't think about the human lives intertwined in the truth she was about to twist. She only thought about winning. Within minutes, social media detonated. Breaking student Iris Bennett allegedly pregnant with Blake Harrington's child. Sources claim the pregnancy is a calculated move. Is this a billionaire baby trap? Screenshots, fake or manipulated, spread like wildfire. Comment sections spiraled without mercy. By the time Iris saw the news, she was on her way to class, coffee in hand, still trying to steady herself after the shock of the positive test. Her phone buzzed once, twice, 20 times. She stepped aside, confused, and opened her notifications. The world collapsed. Her breath snagged as headline after headline flashed across her screen. Her heart kicked painfully against her ribs. "No," she whispered. "Please, no." Photos of her, posts about her, her face plastered next to Blake's in mocking thumbnails. Then the comments hit her. Typical, trying to secure a rich man's inheritance. Playing the victim, then cashing out. She planned this. Girls like her always do. She should have looked for a job, not a womb, to invest in. Her vision blurred. Her knees trembled. People stared now, whispers turning sharp, judgmental. A girl across the hall took a picture. Another snickered. Someone muttered something under their breath about social climbing and attention seekers. And then the one that shattered her. She used him, all for money, not surprising considering where she comes from. The words hit her like a slap. Her throat locked. Her chest burned. She pressed a hand to her stomach. An instinctive protective gesture, then crumpled to a bench, tears spilling uncontrollably. She didn't even have the strength to hide them. Blake's assistant burst into his office without knocking. "Sir, you need to see this." Blake had been reviewing quarterly projections. Numbers blurred when he saw the headline. Something cold and violent ripped through him. Pregnant. Iris. Exposed. His chair scraped back. "Where is she?" "Sir, your PR team needs where." "Is she?" The assistant swallowed. "On campus. She's trending everywhere." Blake didn't wait to hear more. He grabbed his coat, storming past his staff, ignoring the crowd of journalists already gathering outside the building. The drive felt endless, every red light, every block like a punishment. His mind churned. Why hadn't she told him? How long had she been going through this alone? What was she feeling right now, and beneath all that guilt? Because he had stepped back. Because he hadn't been there. Because she had faced fear alone when it should have been shared. By the time Blake found Iris, she was sitting on the edge of the quad, hands covering her face, phone buzzing relentlessly beside her. Students lingered nearby, gossiping, pointing, whispering words she shouldn't have to hear. Blake's anger rose sharp and protective. "Back away," he said, voice like ice. A few startled. Others recognized him and scattered quickly. Iris didn't look up, until he knelt in front of her. Her eyes were red swollen, drenched in pain so raw it sliced through him. "Iris," he said softly, voice breaking around her name. She shook her head, breath trembling. "You weren't supposed to find out like this." "I don't care how I found out," Blake said. "I care that you're alone and hurt." "I didn't want this to happen," she whispered. "I didn't want any of this. Not the headlines, not the judgment, not people calling me." Her voice cracked. She couldn't finish the sentence, and Blake didn't make her. He reached out slowly, giving her space to refuse. She didn't. Her hand slid into his, trembling violently. His thumb brushed her knuckles in a slow grounding circle. "None of what they're saying is true," he murmured. She let out a broken breath. "They think I trapped you, that I planned it. And I know better," he said firmly. "I know you. No, you know what you want to believe." He winced, because she was hurting, because she didn't trust the one person who wanted nothing more than to fight for her. "Iris," he said, quiet but fierce, "this isn't your fault, and you're not going through it by yourself." More tears fell silent, devastating. "But I am alone," she whispered. "That's what they're telling me. That's what the world sees. That I'm just some girl who—" "Stop." Blake cupped her cheek gently, his voice cracking for the first time in years. "You are not what they say. You are not their story. You are not their stereotype." Her chin trembled. "And this baby," he said, hand lowering to her still flat stomach with reverent hesitation, "is not a burden, not a scandal, not a mistake." Her breath hitched at the word baby, said aloud. A truth finally given shape. But fear still clung to her. "Blake," she whispered, "I don't want to become a responsibility you resent." He swallowed hard. "You won't be. You aren't." She closed her eyes, overwhelmed, lost. He wished he could take the world off her shoulders. He wished he could silence every voice tearing her down. But for now, all he could do was stay. Stay steady. Stay present. Stay hers in whatever way she needed. He pulled her gently into his arms. She didn't resist. The world watched. The world judged. But at that moment, none of it mattered. Because for the first time since the nightmare began, she didn't feel alone. The world did not calm down overnight. If anything, the chaos sharpened. Every news alert carried Iris's name. Every campus whisper felt like a blade. Every cruel headline cut deeper than the last. But Blake didn't flinch. He didn't hide. He didn't demand answers or explanations. He just stood beside her with a steadiness she had not expected and didn't yet know how to hold. After pulling her from the quad, he brought her somewhere no cameras could follow, a quiet rooftop garden above a friend's private building. A place surrounded by greenery and open sky, where the city noise faded into a distant hum. Iris sat on a wooden bench, wrapped in Blake's suit jacket, hands trembling in her lap. She felt fragile, exposed, more afraid than she had ever been. Blake knelt in front of her, slowly, as if approaching a frightened deer. "Look at me," he murmured. She lifted her eyes, hesitant, bracing for disappointment, anger, confusion, something she couldn't bear to see reflected in him. But what she found instead was softness, not pity, not shock, just a deep grounding tenderness she wasn't prepared for. "Iris," Blake said, voice steady but raw at the edges. Nothing you could ever tell me would make me walk away. Her chin quivered. You don't understand. I understand enough. He moved closer, and I'm listening to the rest. She swallowed hard, her voice barely a whisper. I didn't plan this. I didn't even know until this morning, and I was terrified to tell you because I don't want this to be a burden you feel obligated to carry. His expression tightened, not with anger, but with something closer to heartbreak. You really think I would see you, or this child, as a burden? His voice dropped to a whisper. Iris. He reached for her hand, not forcefully but gently, giving her every chance to pull away. She didn't. He exhaled shakily, a man letting go of something he'd been holding inside far too long. This baby is ours, he said quietly, reverently. Her breath hitched. She didn't expect her heart to stutter at that word ours, yet it did. Blake continued, voice thick. And you are not alone in this. Not today. Not tomorrow. Not a single moment going forward. A warm tear slid down Iris's cheek. Blake caught it with his thumb, brushing it away with the care of someone who had once been careless with the people he loved, and had vowed not to repeat that mistake. I'm scared, she whispered. I am too, he admitted, but we'll be scared together. She bit her lip. Blake, you barely know me. He shook his head. I know what matters. Iris scoffed softly, tears pooling. What does that even mean? It means, Blake said, his voice firm yet tender, that I know your strength. I know your kindness. I know the way your eyes carry more honesty than most people I've known in my entire life. I know how you fight your battles quietly without asking anyone to save you. He paused, breath rough. And I know I want to be part of your life, not because of the baby, but because of you. The air stilled. Every leaf seemed to hold its breath. Iris felt something inside her chest give something tight, something she had guarded for far too long. People think I'm using you, she whispered, that I'm after your money or your status. Blake's jaw clenched. Those people don't know you. They don't have to, she whispered painfully. They only have to believe it, and the world will treat me like it's true. He lowered his forehead to hers, closing the small distance between them. Not romantic, not demanding, but intimate in the gentlest way. Then let them talk, he said. Let them speculate, judge, shout. Their noise changes nothing. You, me, this baby, this is our reality, and I'm choosing it. Her breath shook. You don't have to. I do, he said, because I want to. A tear fell again, but this time she didn't wipe it away. Blake, her voice trembled, I can't be absorbed by your life. I can't lose myself in your shadow. That scares me more than anything. He nodded slowly. Then I'll learn to make space. For you. For us. Something warm flickered in her chest, small, cautious, but undeniably real. Yet beneath that warmth, a sliver of fear remained. Even if you mean all this, she whispered, how do we survive the world outside this rooftop? The racism, the class differences, the assumptions people make. How do we raise a child under a spotlight neither of us asked for? Blake held her gaze, unwavering. By standing together, he said, by being honest, by fighting side by side instead of running in opposite directions. He took a slow breath, steadying his voice. Iris, you and this baby are my family. Her eyes widened, tears catching in her lashes. family. A word she hadn't expected to hear from him. A word loaded with weight and meaning. A word she'd always wanted, feared, and hoped for all at once. Blake continued, his voice low and certain. I promise I won't let you do this alone. I won't let you carry shame that doesn't belong to you. I won't let you be silenced or judged without standing beside you. His hand moved instinctively toward her stomach, but stopped just short, waiting for permission. Iris nodded. He placed his palm gently against her abdomen, a touch both protective and reverent, a touch that changed everything. Her breath trembled, his eyes softened, and in that moment, Iris knew Blake Harrington wasn't just a powerful man choosing to protect her. He was a man choosing love, choosing responsibility, choosing growth, choosing her. The rooftop felt quieter, warmer, smaller in the best way. And for the first time since the test turned positive, Iris didn't feel terrified. She felt held. The decision was not impulsive. Blake Harrington did not rush into war. He prepared for it, quietly, methodically, with a resolve that made his legal team sit up straighter when he said only 2 words, find everything. They understood the weight beneath his calm. Not revenge, not pride, justice. Justice for the woman carrying his child. Justice for the life Sabrina had tried to destroy. Justice for a truth that had been twisted beyond recognition. Within days, the quiet investigation began. Not extravagant, not loud, Blake refused to cause Iris more harm by feeding the media frenzy. His lawyers traced IP addresses, recovered metadata, retrieved chat logs Sabrina thought she had erased, located payments made through shell accounts to paparazzi hackers and hotel employees. The more they uncovered, the colder Blake became. Each forged message, each manipulated photo, each calculated lie. He studied every detail with the precision of a man who had built an empire off logic, and who now used that same logic to dismantle an enemy. Meanwhile, Iris tried to keep breathing through the storm. Classes felt unbearable. Strangers stared at her stomach even though it wasn't showing. Online comments swung from cruelty to pity, neither of which she wanted. But something had changed since the rooftop. She wasn't collapsing anymore. She walked through campus with her head held higher, shaky at times, yes, but upright. She answered questions calmly. She stopped reading comments. She met her professor's eyes without flinching. Because she wasn't carrying shame now. She was carrying truth, and a new life, and a new certainty. Even without Blake, she would have found a way forward. But with him, she found strength she didn't know she had permission to feel. When the investigation concluded, Blake called for a press conference. Not at a glamorous hotel. Not in his headquarters. But in a modest conference room, inside a community center where the walls were lined with posters about youth mentorship and small business grants. Iris didn't want to stand at his side. Not because she didn't trust him, she did, but because she didn't want to be a figurehead in his fight. Yet when she arrived, her presence drew a breath from him he hadn't realized he was holding. You came, he murmured. She nodded softly. I came for myself. And that alone eased something deep inside him. The room was small, packed with journalists whose curiosity had sharpened into hunger. Microphones crowded the podium. Cameras flashed even before Blake stepped forward. But when he did, the room fell into a hush. Blake Harrington had always commanded attention. Today, he commanded truth. "We have concluded a formal investigation," he began, voice measured, "and the results are illuminating." A ripple of anticipation moved through the crowd. Flashes intensified. His lawyer beside him distributed folders, thick stacks of evidence. Journalists scanned the pages. Gasps filled the room. Emails, payment records, metadata showing altered images, screenshots proving forged messages, contracts leaking Sabrina Price's financial arrangements with tabloids. Everything. Undeniable. Unwelcome. Blake's voice didn't rise. It didn't need to. For weeks, a student, someone with no wealth, no platform, no protection, was vilified based on lies he said. Today, those lies end. Reporters scribbled, cameras whirred. Blake's eyes flicked toward Iris, not for approval, but grounding. She met his gaze with trembling strength. Sabrina Price. Blake continued, orchestrated this smear campaign. He didn't soften the accusation. He didn't indulge revenge. He simply laid out the facts, every word sharp but restrained. When Sabrina herself entered late, dragged by her own PR team, she looked stunned. She hadn't expected exposure. She hadn't expected evidence this airtight. She hadn't expected to lose. Her gaze shot toward Iris, accusatory, venomous, as if Iris had somehow earned this victory unfairly. But Iris didn't shrink. Not this time. She didn't hide behind Blake. She didn't look away. She met Sabrina's glare with quiet, unflinching defiance. A woman who had been pushed to the edge and chosen to rise, not break. Fallout was immediate. Within an hour, Sabrina was trending for all the wrong reasons. Lawsuits filed. Partnerships revoked. Speaking engagements canceled. Her endorsements dropped her with statements of condemnation. By evening, she was blacklisted from the business sphere entirely. Her empire, built on appearances and manipulation, crumbled in a single day. But Blake didn't linger to witness her collapse. As the crowd dispersed, he stepped away from the microphones. The cameras, the noise. He walked straight to Iris. "You did that," he said quietly, not claiming credit. "Your strength made this possible." She shook her head. "You're the one who found the truth." "But you're the one who faced the lies," he replied. Her eyes burned, not with pain this time, but with something softer, something steadier. "You believed me," Iris whispered. "Always," Blake said. "Not a vow, not a promise, a fact." The sunlight outside the community center was warm golden. Students passing by stared not with judgment now, but with recognition. Some nodded. Some offered small, supportive smiles. Iris felt something shift inside her, relief, yes, but also a subtle reclaiming. She was no longer a headline, or a rumor, or a scandal. She was herself again. Hurt, but healing. Afraid, but fierce. Carrying new life, but standing on her own feet. Blake reached for her hand, not to guide her, not to claim her, but to share the weight she no longer needed to carry alone. She didn't pull away, not anymore. For the first time since the storm began, Iris inhaled deeply, and it didn't hurt. The storm left scars, but it also carved space for something new. Something that neither Iris nor Blake had ever truly experienced, a beginning built on honesty. For the first time in weeks, Iris felt the world quiet around her. Not because the noise had stopped, but because she had stopped letting it dictate her worth. And Blake, for the first time in his life, wasn't trying to outrun his emotions or drown them in work. He was learning slowly, painfully, to sit with them. They didn't dive back into romance. They didn't pretend everything was fixed. They didn't pretend the scars weren't real. They started gently. Iris suggested therapy. Blake agreed without hesitation. Not because he thought it would fix them, but because he wanted to understand her and himself. Truly, deeply, without ego. Their first session felt like stepping onto unfamiliar terrain. Iris sat, with her hands folded over the small swell beginning to show beneath her sweater. She felt vulnerable, exposed, nervous. Opening her heart had never been easy, not after betrayal had shattered it more than once. Blake sat beside her posture, straight eyes steady but unsure. He wasn't used to being this open. He was used to solving problems with strategy, not vulnerability. The therapist asked simple questions. What scares you most? What do you need to feel safe? What would a healthy relationship look like for you? The answers didn't come easily. Iris spoke first. Voice soft. I'm scared of losing myself, of being consumed by someone else's life. I've fought too hard to stand on my own, and I don't want to disappear again. Blake listened, as if every word were scripture. Not interrupting, not defending, just listening. When it was his turn, he exhaled slowly, an unfamiliar kind of release. I'm afraid of failing the people I love. I've spent years thinking success would protect me from that. It didn't. He glanced at her just for a second, but I want to learn how to be present, how to love without controlling, how to be a partner, not a protector. Those sessions became a rhythm. Wednesdays at 5 p.m., a quiet room with warm lighting, 2 chairs angled toward one another, and conversations that broke them open piece by piece. Sometimes, Iris cried, old wounds resurfacing, pain she thought she had buried rising again. Blake didn't rush to wipe her tears. He sat with her, offering silence that felt safe. Sometimes Blake shut down habitual walls, snapping into place, his instinct to fix, overtaking his instinct to feel. Iris didn't push. She rested her hand on his, reminding him she wasn't leaving. Slowly, gently, the walls between them began to soften. Outside therapy, their connection grew in small, meaningful ways. Evening walks through the park near Iris's dorm. Her arm looped through his, the autumn air crisp against their cheeks. Quiet dinners in Blake's penthouse, not extravagant, just warm meals cooked together with music playing softly in the background. Late-night conversations where they shared their childhoods, their failures, their dreams. Blake admitted he sometimes woke terrified that she would vanish again, that he wasn't enough. Iris confessed she worried every day that she wasn't strong enough for motherhood or for loving a man who lived in a world so different from hers. And every time they met each other with gentleness rather than fear. Their love didn't return in a rush of passion. There were no dramatic kisses or declarations, no impulsive reunions. It grew like spring after winter, quiet, steady, patient. One evening, Iris rested on Blake's couch, curled against a pillow, the glow of the city lighting her face. She laughed softly as Blake tried and failed to assemble a baby crib from an online tutorial. He looked up, cheeks flushed with embarrassment, and she smiled in a way that stole his breath. Not because it was romantic, but because it was peaceful. You don't have to do everything alone, you know, she teased gently. He set down the screwdriver, rubbing the back of his neck. I'm trying to be useful. You are, she said, but you don't have to be perfect. He paused, then sat beside her. I don't want perfect, he admitted. I want honest. I want us. Iris swallowed, emotion blooming inside her. We're getting there. He reached for her hand, slowly giving her room to pull away. She didn't. Her fingers intertwined with his fitting, as if they had always belonged there. They sat together in comfortable silence, her head finding his shoulder, his thumb brushing slow circles against her palm. For the first time in a long time, Iris felt grounded, seen, safe, and Blake, for the first time ever, felt enough. Not because of his power or achievements or wealth, but because she chose to stay. Not out of fear, not out of obligation, but out of love slowly returning to life. In that quiet, ordinary moment, with half-assembled baby furniture at their feet and city lights glowing above them, their relationship shifted from survival to something real, something lasting, something strong. A beginning not built on chaos or desperation, but healing. The third ultrasound was supposed to be routine. Just another appointment, just another check-in, just another quiet moment in a long, careful journey. But Iris woke that morning with a strange flutter in her chest, an anxious, trembling expectation she couldn't explain. She dressed slowly, smoothing her sweater over the gentle curve of her belly, now unmistakably showing. The baby moved more often now. Small kicks, soft shifts, like whispers against her ribs. Each movement made her heart tighten with a bittersweet awe. She was carrying a life that had changed everything. A life that forced her to examine who she was, who she wanted to be. But today, something felt different. Maybe it was the way Blake called that morning voice, warm but excited, reminding her what time he'd pick her up. Maybe it was the quiet tenderness in his eyes over the last few weeks. Maybe it was the way their love, once chaotic and painful, had grown into something steady and patient, rooted in understanding rather than urgency. Or maybe Iris simply sensed that today would be a turning point. She didn't know yet how right she was. At the clinic, the waiting room was calm, painted in soft greens and whites. Posters of newborns lined the walls. Iris sat beside Blake on a cushioned bench. His hand rested close to hers, but didn't touch until she reached for him first, a tiny gesture he'd learned meant everything. He smiled quietly, lacing their fingers together. You okay? He asked. Yes, she whispered. And she was more okay than she'd been in months. The nurse called her name, and Iris stood, her heart pounding. Blake followed close behind his presence, steadying her as they entered the dimly lit exam room. Iris lay back on the table, lifting her sweater just enough for the gel. The cold touch made her gasp softly, and Blake instinctively squeezed her hand. The doctor smiled warmly. All right, let's take a look at your little one. The ultrasound wand moved across her stomach. Static, a flicker, a blur. Then a sound. Fast, steady, certain, a heartbeat. Iris's breath shattered. The room blurred as tears brimmed in her eyes, spilling before she could stop them. The heartbeat was so real, so alive, so loud, it felt like it filled her entire chest. Blake's grip tightened gently, and when she turned her head toward him, she saw something she hadn't seen before. His eyes shone too, not with fear, not with shock, but with reverence. Pure, unfiltered awe. As if the sound stitched something back together inside him. As if the heartbeat wasn't just the baby's, but his own rediscovering its rhythm. The moment everything shifted, the doctor continued speaking, pointing out tiny limbs, giving measurements. But Iris couldn't hear anything except that steady, miraculous rhythm. She cried silently, the tears slipping sideways into her hair. Blake brushed one away with his thumb, his hand trembling just slightly. She didn't think he even realized how gently he was touching her. The doctor excused herself a moment later, saying she'd print the images. The door clicked shut. Silence fell. Soft, full, electric. Blake didn't sit, didn't speak. He simply stood at her side, studying her tear-streaked face, as if committing every detail to memory. Iris wiped her cheeks, breath unsteady. "Sorry, I didn't expect to cry like that." "Don't apologize," Blake said quietly. "It's beautiful." She laughed weakly, embarrassed. "I just wasn't ready for how real it sounds." He nodded slowly, but his gaze had shifted, becoming something deeper, something she couldn't name. "Blake," she whispered. He exhaled shakily. Then he moved, not with hesitation, not with uncertainty, with purpose. He lowered himself to one knee beside the exam table. Iris froze. "Blake, what are you?" But he lifted a hand, asking her for a moment, and everything inside her melted into silence. He had no ring box, no fancy speech prepared, no practiced charm, just truth. The raw, unpolished kind. The kind she'd always wanted from him. The proposal. His voice was soft, unsteady, honest. "The first time you walked away," he began, "I let you go because I thought you needed space from Ma, and I told myself it was the right thing. And maybe it was." Iris swallowed, her heart thundering. "But these months, watching you stand against lies, watching you grow stronger through every storm, watching you fight for yourself when the world tried to crush you." His voice cracked. "You showed me what courage looks like, what love looks like." Her breath hitched. "Iris, I don't want to love you in silence, and I don't want to build a family defined by fear or distance." He placed his hand gently over her stomach. "I want to love you out loud. I want to choose you every day, not because we made a mistake one night, but because you are the person I want beside me for every tomorrow." Tears spilled freely down Iris's cheeks now. Blake looked up at her blue eyes, steady, vulnerable. "You and this baby. You're my family," he whispered. "The family I choose. The family I want to protect and respect and grow with." He took her trembling hand. "Iris Bennett," he breathed, voice breaking in the most beautiful way. "Will you marry me? Will you let me build a life with you? A real one shaped by love and patience and choice?" Her chest tightened painfully, beautifully. She didn't speak at first. She couldn't. Emotion filled her throat until words were impossible. Then finally a whisper. A truth. A promise. Yes, she cried. Yes, I choose you too. Her voice trembled, but her heart didn't. She lifted her hand to his cheek. He leaned into her touch like it was something sacred. He rose, and she pulled him into her arms. He held her careful and strong, kissing her forehead, her hair, her tears, and between them, a flutter. The baby moved, soft, certain, like an answer. Iris laughed through her tears. Did you feel? Yes, Blake, whispered awe flooding his face. I think they're celebrating with us. Their foreheads touched, breaths mingling. The moment felt like the universe folding into a single point of light. The sound of their baby's heartbeat still echoed faintly from the machine. Steady, alive, a rhythm that belonged to all three of them. Epilogue. Love Reborn. The weeks that followed felt like a gentle dawn after a long storm. Wedding plans grew slowly, lovingly. Nothing extravagant, nothing for the cameras, just family, healing and support. They continued therapy together. They talked through fears, money, privilege, identity, race, expectations, none of it avoided, all of it honored. Blake learned to soften. Iris learned to trust again. And their love grew with every breath, every touch, every shared quiet moment. Not from passion alone, not from need, not from desperation, but from choice. A steady, deliberate choosing of each other over and over. When Iris walked into their nursery, built together, painted soft green, she sometimes stood there, with a hand over her heart, overwhelmed by a truth that still felt new. She had not just found love. She had built it, brick by brick, healing by healing, heartbeat by heartbeat. And Blake, watching her from the doorway, eyes soft, smile gentle, felt the same. Their life wasn't perfect. It wasn't meant to be, but it was real, rooted, whole. Two hearts once shattered, now stitched together by forgiveness growth, and a future they chose with open eyes. A family, their family. And when their baby arrived months later, crying warm, impossibly small, their tears blended on the infant's blanket. Not from fear, not from regret, but from joy. Pure, quiet, extraordinary joy. The end.